And I'm still playing with my new tablet, but we're gonna do a news story here. Um, this is from a couple days ago, and I had to wait till I got my tablet yesterday to be able to do any news stories, really at all. Um, the Republican Party isn't giving up like the Whigs. It's now a political movement that's embracing fraud and deceit as a key to its survival and success. To read and listen to the headlines after House Republicans had voted to remove Liz Cheney only because she didn't agree with Trump's lie, and they removed her from her leadership post. And one would think that the turning point in the Republican Party began with its denial of the 2020 election result after November 3rd or the Capitol insurrection that happened on January 6th. And neither of these moments, however, is or was the actual turning point. Instead, the transformation, one of the nation's two major political parties, took place well before each of these events. And the and the longer it takes for the public conversation to recognize how dramatically the Republican Party has already shifted, the longer it will take to develop a coherent civic strategy to protect U.S. democracy going forward. And we do need a strategy because this political crisis is not just internal machinations of a single political party. It is a political crisis of a nation. Indeed, it might be hyperbolic to characterize our or present our national state as what we would refer to it as the midst of the third revolution. What was at first an acquiescence to Donald Trump since his nomination at the Republican National Convention in 2016, it slowly became a public acceptance and then an entanglement. Some who were slow to realize the tectonic shift taking place in the Republican Party over the past 5 years have awakened from their slumber in the wake of the attack on the Capitol, but they were a little too late. Those who thought that they could write out Trump's squatterable term before getting in the right side of history were wrong. The time for choosing in a way to actually to affect the trajectory of the modern day Republican Party was earlier. One explanation for this delayed acknowledgement could be that even sophisticated political participants forget how quickly political parties can completely transform or disappear. And some political actors perhaps thought that they had more time in the 1850s. Now, back in the 1850s, and this was before the Civil War happened, the relative balance that had lasted for a generation between the two political parties, like the Democrats and the Whig, had collapsed. The Whig Party disappeared in 1856. Between the years of 1852 and 1856, the last being known 1856. As this historic transformation shows, the fundamental change to a political party need not take decades. It can just happen in a few years' time. From 2016 to 2020, it appeared that the Republican Party might disintegrate like the Whigs did. And first, the GOP looked away as Trump relied on family members instead of government professionals to be his White House advisors. Second, midway through his squatting, the squatter fired or solicited the resignations of political appointees of his own party who had been confirmed by the Senate. He repeatedly turned on his own appointees, particularly when they sought to carry out their lawful functions. And third, the Republican convention in 2020 declined to adopt a political platform, and instead, it allowed the party to reflect the whims of its highly personalized leader. And since then, the vast majority of Republican voters and officials have embraced the denial of the 2020 election result, and they refuse to acknowledge the severity of the January 6th insurrection on the Capitol. And these developments reveal that the Republican Party will not give up like the Whigs. The party will persevere, and emboldened by taking pride in belligerence and transformed into a political movement that embraces fraud and deceit as fundamental to its survival and electoral success. And we are all familiar with the First American Revolution, which was an actual war, a rebellion for self-governance. But it was not long after Thomas Jefferson called the election of 1800 the Second American Revolution. The election of the Democratic Republicans over the Federalists set the course for the nation in Jefferson's vision of American democracy, and permanently they marginalized the Federalist Party and led to its ultimate replacement by the Whigs. In the hours after their insurrection at the U.S. Capitol, the former squatter Trump tweeted, "Remember this day forever." Participants in the melee he incited openly invoked the 1776. We will not know until after the 2022 midterms and after the 2024 presidential election whether the result of 2020 set the nation on the path toward Democratic Party domination for a generation, like the election of 1800. But we think that this moment in our nation's history is best understood as the Third American Revolution, hopefully primarily of competing ideas and minimally of political violence. and where the effective functioning of American elections and democratic institutions hangs in the balance. It is no longer enough to characterize the present political crisis as an internal party dispute. Instead, we are witnessing to a political revolution that will define America's society and governance for decades to come. But yep.